At 72 years old, he's dating the bright, spirited, and unapologetically herself, Jordan Hudson, who happens to be 24 years old. Their relationship has sparked more than a few conversations, but what happens when a TV host tries to make it the punchline of a joke? What happens next is a masterclass in grace, confidence, and dropping some serious life lessons. Before we get into the heart of the story, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for being here. If you love stories that entertain, inspire, and get you thinking, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what's coming next. And while you're here, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story is reaching. Bill Belichick had seen it all. Over decades of coaching, he had been asked every tough question in the playbook of interviews. But as he prepared for another sit-down, this time across from a young, sharp-tongued TV host, he sensed this conversation wouldn't be about football. Still, he approached the stage with the same calm, deliberate mindset he brought to every game plan. He wasn't a man to be easily unsettled. The host spoke first, his tone light, but the edge in her words unmistakable. "Coach Belichick, it's an honor to have you with us today. You've led your teams to incredible successes, broken records, truly the stuff of legends. But today, we're taking a little detour from playbooks and field goals, aren't we?" Bill nodded lightly. "Seems like we are. Of course, everyone knows you as the mastermind of football strategy, the architect of countless victories," she continued. "But lately, it's not your coaching that's been making headlines. It's your personal life." He leaned forward with a look that was part curiosity, part smugness. "What's it been like dating Jordan Hudson? She's 24, right?" Bill stayed still, his expression calm. He had expected this. "Yes, Jordan is 24, and she's an incredible individual." The host grinned. "And you're 72. He paused dramatically before launching the line he'd probably rehearsed. "Don't you shame dating someone less than half your age?" There was laughter from the smaller audience around them. Some chuckled nervously, others gleefully. The host leaned back, pleased with what he likely saw as a zinger. Bill didn't respond right away. Instead, he sat quietly, meeting his gaze with a measured calm. The silence stretched just long enough for the laughter to fade. "That," Bill finally said, his voice steady, "is an interesting way to phrase your question." The host blinked, taken aback by his composed demeanor. "Well," he added with a nervous chuckle, "I just meant, surely you can see why people might find it, unusual." "You mean unusual to you?" Bill corrected. His tone wasn't defensive or harsh, it was factual, disarmingly calm. "It's funny how we're all different people, and yet how often we assume others should think and live the same way we do." The room was quiet. Bill leaned forward slightly, his gaze direct but relaxed. "Before I say anything more, I'd like to ask you a question." The host tilted his head, puzzled but intrigued. "Sure, coach." "Why do you think this is funny, honestly?" The smile faded from her face as he shifted uneasily in his chair. I wasn't laughing at you personally. It's just, the age difference. People naturally talk about things like that." "I see," Bill said. "I was curious because you brought laughter into the room without really asking a question. It seemed more like a judgment disguised as humor." The host opened his mouth but said nothing. Bill continued. "You're free to laugh, of course. Everyone's entitled to make their judgments. But have you stopped to think about what that judgment says about you?" He squirmed. "Well, it's not that deep, coach. It's lighthearted." Bill smiled faintly. "That's interesting, too. Nothing about age difference in relationships seemed light-hearted when I was getting to know Jordan. What I noticed was her intelligence, her kindness, and how she challenges me to see the world differently. You've called that unusual today. I call it one of the greatest compliments to my life. And above all else, it's real." The audience sat quietly, absorbing his words. The young host finally spoke. "I wasn't trying to insult your relationship. I hope you know that." "I hear you," Bill said, "and I'm not offended. But I wonder if I asked about your personal choices." His voice softened. "Choices that others might not fully understand. I wonder whether you'd feel a need to justify yourself." TV host exhaled sharply. "I suppose I'd feel a little defensive." "And you'd have the right to," he nodded. "Because where you find value and joy shouldn't be open to public approval. Yet here we are, having that conversation." The host nodded, a hint of humility creeping into her expression. "That's a good point, Coach. I guess public scrutiny is something that comes with being as high profile as you are." Bill's tone stayed even. But the issue isn't really scrutiny, is it? It's where the scrutiny comes from. The loudest voices are often outside observers, people who don't live your life, don't know your heart, and haven't earned a seat at your table of judgment. And yet, those voices think they have a say in the choices you make for yourself. What do you think about that? The host sat silently for a moment, clearly mulling over his question. Finally, he answered with a sheepish shrug. "I think sometimes we're quick to assume we know what's best for others, even when we really don't." "Exactly," Bill agreed. "You understand football, right?" "Somewhat," he said with a slight laugh. "Well," he continued, "there's this key lesson I tell my players over and over. Do your job. Know your role. Don't lose focus worrying about how someone else is running a play, because the second you take your eyes off your own task, you lose your edge. That's how games are lost. Life isn't so different. You lose something valuable when you focus on someone else's choices at the expense of understanding your own." The host's face softened. "I guess I hadn't thought of it like that." "Most people don't," Bill said, his voice steady but kind. "But I didn't come here to change your mind. I came here to have a conversation, and if we're talking, I think we can both agree that respect is a better place to start than judgment." The audience began clapping softly at first, and then louder. Bill leaned back in his chair, motionless, as if the applause barely registered to him. The host looked humbled, his earlier cockiness replaced with something closer to admiration. "Coach, I have to tell you, this conversation went in a direction I didn't expect, and I think I needed to hear that." "We all need to hear it sometimes," Bill said simply. "Life puts people in front of us for a reason. We either choose to listen, or we waste the opportunity." A warm smile crossed his lips. "Fair enough. And for what it's worth," Bill added, "Jordan knows what people think about her, about us. She still stands by me, not because of public approval, but because of what we bring to each other. That's what defines a relationship, not age, not headlines, just the people in it." The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. After a beat, the host spoke again. "Coach, I think you just taught me more about relationships than I've learned in years of talking to people twice our age." Bill chuckled dryly. "It's not about how long you've lived, it's about what you've learned along the way." With that, the conversation came to a close. The lesson, however, lingered long after. Respect, understanding, and perspective. These were the values Bill Belichick had long championed on and off the field. Today, he proved once again why he wasn't just a coach of football, but a coach of life.